what? I am trying to get into Berkeley next year. My name is Matthew Kroll.
And what is a Tumblr? My name is Shahir Dowd.
And this is the only podcast about movies, specifically the film
Siri, what is searching?
There we go. That was, well, look at that. We did Foley work. We did a referential comedy.
I'm sure Siri would come back with, Shahir, what are you searching?
Yeah, see, there we go.
Yeah.
I don't know. Anyway, welcome everybody. Welcome back, Shahir. Last week, I was away in Seattle.
Yes, thank you for taking care of that. I am eager to actually play. It was called Last Night.
It's called Late Shift.
Late Shift, sorry.
Yeah.
Late Shift, apologies. I'm very eager to check it out. I listened to the first half hour of the podcast, and then I was like, I kind of want to play this. And then I went online and looked up. You can actually just watch people playing it.
Yep.
But I think I want to do the
You
interactive.
should do it because you'd lose. It wouldn't. It's not a strong enough narrative to last without you interacting with it, if that makes sense.
The only thing was the interactivity. I don't know what you guys said about this towards the end of the podcast. The interactivity didn't seem like that mind-blowing. It's basically like
choose your own adventure.
Yeah, pick an interaction.
But then it depending on what you pick, and you could kind of see under the hood a bit about how many branching paths did what where. There were 7 different endings that you could get. But really there were 3. Like,
how do you feel about it compared to like the Telltale games?
Well, Telltale what it lost about it, we actually mentioned this near the end of the podcast, is the Telltale games really when you say something or do something to a specific character, there's a thing that says like Joseph will remember that or Susan will remember that or whatever it is, like, and then those things all add up to then hopefully have a bigger impact on the stuff. So it's less a like do this or do that, and that affects the story. It's like, oh, well, now this character's at 20% liking you, but this character's at 70%, and I think it does more math to figure out what direction you go depending on who you're interacting with, where this is literally like, pick a button.
Yeah, I feel like we should explain this for the audience, because I feel like we were like just talking.
We jumped right in.
But what was it? Was a full motion video game that you decided to review at PAX because I wasn't there.
Yes, and it's not a newish game. That's something that I wanted to make clear. I think it came out in 2016, but it was shot so well. I was looking for a thing to do about games because PAX was happening. We tend to do stuff about games during that time, and the thing that was the most interesting to me was, I'm going to do hard air quotes, moving the genre forward, or not moving the genre, moving the narrative experience forward.
For movies or games?
Yes.
Okay.
So and that was the thing, and I wanted to see, because this film, and I will call it a film, Late Shift, it looks great.
Yeah.
It doesn't look innovative, but it just looks clean and good, if that makes sense. It looks way better than any other full motion video game I've ever seen. A lot of times they're very, very hokey in both not only narrative but actual structure of the film or video content they're showing you. Okay. And this was like butter. It was very prepackaged butter. This is not artisan butter that you will get in the country. This is like Land O'Lakes from your grocer's freezer sort of deal. But it was nice. And yeah, you can go back and listen to the episode because it was super interesting. We had James Portnow on there and another artist from Extra Credits, Joseph Maslow, and getting both of their perspectives on this was super fun. And playing through it with them was crazy fun too. It's something, honestly, you might be bored by yourself, but if you did it with like your wife or you did it with friends, like it's a real fun time.
How long did it take to play through the game?
Maybe 2 hours, 2-ish, maybe less depending on how quick you do it.
Okay, and compared to going to the movies for 2 hours, did you think it was money well spent? And
we spent a total of $7 on it, so split that between 3 people. Yeah, it was worth 2 hours and $2.86 of my money. Yeah. Now, would I want to spend full price and do something like that? Would I want to do it in a theater full of people that are voting on it? I don't know.
That would be interesting, wouldn't it?
Telltale has a thing like that for presentations and stuff. There was a thing I went to when the Guardians of the Galaxy game was released, where it was like a party and an event, and you go and you can vote with your phone as the choice is happening, and so a group of 200 people can play the game, again, hard air quotes, together. And it was interesting, and you got a little bit of audience participation in there, but like it's very telling what kind of, like, if you get 200 people to keep giving their opinions, you get shocked as to what moral choices are the majority.
Also, I feel like that's not sustainable for more than like 40 minutes, right? Like in a crowd environment. Like I can't imagine doing that for more than 40
People definitely lost interest.
Yeah.
But
all right. Well, that coupled with the fact that theme parks are having kind of an like creating interactive experiences based around movies. I'm just been looking into the Avatar land at Disneyland.
Oh boy.
So I think there's an interesting circulation of like what can we do with interactivity in terms of narrative. That I think your podcast that episode really taps into. So people should check that out. The movie is called Late Shift. It's developed by Whale Interactive.
Wales Interactive.
Wales Interactive? Yeah. Are they Welsh?
Yeah.
Okay.
Maybe.
Also, you can reach out to us at onlymoviepodcast@gmail.com or hit us up on Twitter at onlymoviepod. We are no longer taking requests.
That's true. We do have one more
We have one more request bag to do, which is 3 movies.
Yep.
So I feel like we have more than amply compensated our listeners for the request that they made, which we did not fulfill.
Which was like 3 years ago. So we're once we complete the Cornetto trilogy,
the balance will be 0, and we will institute a new request policy, which will make it easier for you to make requests and perhaps make it a little bit more selective for us about the requests we take and choose. But until that time, for listeners at home, we are about to cut our 360 camera, which we have been recording for the duration of this episode thus far.
Because why not?
Because why not? Because I have a 360 camera that I've been playing with for a little project, and we thought it might be fun for you to be able to see what we're doing. So if you're an audio listener, there is a visual component to this particular episode, which I think fits in with the theme of technology and interactivity that we've been kind of tiptoeing around.
You have successfully shoehorned in your new toy into the conversation about technology and culture.
I'm not gonna say what the toy is though, because I'm not 100% endorsing it.
Yeah, and you're also they're not paying us.
Yeah, exactly. But now we're gonna move on to the debut feature from Anish Aganti, Searching.
Yes,
which is a film that you were actually gonna do last week, and I think would have been actually really interesting for you to do with James Portnow. But I kind of chimed in and said, I kind of want to do this movie.
Yeah, no, of course.
And so appreciate you holding off for a week to do that.
Yeah, no, I was excited to see this movie ever since the trailer came out. I thought it looked as though it could take the crown, as it were, of films that use this particular gimmick of seeing the whole thing through various screens, both multiple computer screens or like YouTube-esque windows or going through chat logs, etc., and do it successfully because of the trailer itself was cut together very well, used a lot of standardized trailer tricks, but also and turned computer sounds into horror sounds.
Yeah.
Just from a tonal perspective, and I was excited to see it. I love John Cho. Mm-hmm. I'm glad to see him getting more serious work outside of Harold and Kumar,
Star Trek,
and Star Trek.
Did you see a movie called Columbus?
I didn't.
Columbus is fantastic, and Columbus, for me, as far as the John Chu train goes, reminded me. Not only is he a leading man,
choo choo,
the choo choo train. Not only is he a leading man, but this dude is fucking James Dean. He is that level of cool and should be in every movie. Like he's a better leading man than most leading men.
Sure.
And you should check out Columbus. Columbus was interesting. It was made by a video essayist by the name of Kogognada.
Okay.
And it's very, I love architecture, and it's a film about architecture and human relationships. And that sounds really boring. And maybe the film is boring to a lot of people, but it's so beautiful. It's so invested in what it's doing, that it's truly, I think one of our listeners recommended I check it out, and I did, and it might be one of the best films I've seen this year.
Okay.
Yeah.
Nice. Well, actually, I'd been hearing a lot of things about Searching and how Searching was possibly the best film of the year, which I on a couple different places that I respect on this here interweb, and I was like, oh, well, I mean, we have to talk about this now. I was interested before, and now it seems like it is a no-brainer. And I will say, before I read the IMDb description, I think I shouldn't have read those reviews.
Okay.
I think it ruined a little bit for me, not necessarily disparaging the film, but disparaging my experience of it. Okay. Which I'll get into in a little bit.
Well, what is the IMDb synopsis? Because before and then after that, I want to talk a little bit about the genre of film.
Of course. Here it is. It says, after his 16-year-old daughter goes missing, a desperate father breaks into her laptop to look for clues to find her.
Okay.
So there's your premise.
Yeah. So the interesting thing here is, of course, is that the entire film takes place on a screen, and it uses modern technology as the main gateway for how the story is told.
Yes.
Now, there is a sort of long tradition of this kind of film, and it's not specifically just the screen film, but also the idea of the forced perspective film.
Yes.
So the film that kind of uses either a form of media or a confined perspective to limit what it is you can and can't see for various effects. So a film like Buried with Ryan Reynolds keeps you inside a coffin the entire film. A first perspective film like Hardcore Henry that we did keeps you locked into one particular camera angle.
128 days later?
128 days later?
Isn't that what it is?
You mean 28 days later?
Is
The
that what it
zombie
is?
film?
No, I mean the one with who's the guy who had to cut his arm off? James Franco.
127 hours?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. If he was out there for 128 days and survived, I would have been very impressed.
Wow. You can tell I've just got off a plane.
Yeah. But no, 127 hours is more of a traditional narrative.
Is it? I had not seen it. I just remember seeing he had a camera in the
He does have a camera.
Okay.
It's funny. I actually just watched that movie about 2 or 3 weeks ago.
fresh in your brain.
Rewatched it a couple of weeks ago. It's fantastic. So it's an interesting conceit, and this also follows in the heel. This film was produced by Timur Bekmambetov, who you might know as the director of Wanted. Ben-Hur, which you might not know about that.
Who?
But also he did the Russian trilogy Night Watch and Day Watch, and I'm sure there's a third one of those.
There is.
Night Watch, Day Watch. No, there isn't actually.
Overwatch.
I think they were trying to do a third one.
And it just didn't happen?
Yeah.
Nah.
But he produced also Unfriended, which is the other fixed perspective movie, which I haven't seen.
I heard bad things.
Yeah, I heard it wasn't that great. And there's an interesting story about how this film got made and how the director became attached. There is a podcast called The Ringer, which you can listen to an interview with Anish Chagnati.
Okay.
But basically, guy's only 27 years old. He made a viral video. Well, he made a sort of a spec commercial for Google Glass, but when it came out.
Right.
And the video he made went viral, and he was eventually hired by Google to produce videos for them.
God, remember Google Glass?
Yeah. And the funny thing about his video is his video doesn't highlight the technology at all. It's just a story about a guy going to India. And
I think I've seen this, yeah.
Yeah. And then just the end of it goes Google Glass. And you're like, well, what does Google Glass have to do with that? But it was very, 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 very well told. And I think, and then I went through and watched all of his Google commercials, and they were all excellent, really, really well told.
Sure.
And basically, him and his producing partner got into a room with Bekmambetov's film company. Bekmambetov. Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
This is why I have you do all of the research stuff, so I don't have to butcher
people's names, and I still butcher them.
Yeah, but we make it through.
And basically, Bekmambetov and his production company were like, hey, we want to produce a lot of these kinds of films because I think they're affordable to make. Unfriended probably made a return. It's kind of the same conceit around the found footage film, where they're cheap to make and you can gain a lot of return, and there's a sort of inherent excitement value to seeing a story played out in this way.
Right.
And this was essentially, I think this is the third film of that, although is there an Unfriended 2?
No, not yet.
Okay. The thing about Bekmambetov is he actually directed one himself. So he's a high-profile director, the director of Wanted.
Yeah.
And he directed one himself called Profile, which flew completely under the radar and nobody has seen.
I don't know.
Yet the film that he produced with this young 27-year-old guy is, it got sold at Sundance for I think it was like $7 million, something like that. And is getting theatrical distribution, is getting great reviews. The conceit, I think the choice of director was around this idea, the guy who does Google videos could probably do a movie about a Mac, like a screen OS system. And I think the broader conceit there that I think actually really works to this film's advantage is the thing about Chagnati? Oh boy, I'm Indian. I should be able to do this. Chaganti, is that he is able to underpin the emotional resonance behind a technological action. So that's what you see in the Google Glass commercial. That's what you see in all of his commercials. Is that he whittles down the emotional core of what a piece of technology is doing, and he does that really, really well. And if we're going to get into first thoughts for this particular film,
Yes, please do.
I think that is the most striking thing about this particular film is that there is obviously a technological conceit which forces you to kind of reckon with it right at the very beginning of the film. It's basically you only see things through a computer screen. And you only see narrative being told through the way people interact with computer screens. But what is striking is that, for me, at least, I kind of forgot about that conceit pretty quickly. In about 5 to 10 minutes, I was kind of completely unaware that was what was happening, and I was just invested in character. And I was invested in what people were thinking and how they were doing it. And all the technological interactions were basically about character. There was never any moment where someone was like doing something where I was like, oh, that's a really cool use of technology. All I was thinking was, oh, that's what that person would do.
Right.
In order to get what they want. And it happened to be through this medium of technology. So I thought understanding how technology has a direct relationship with story is kind of remarkable for this movie. It doesn't ever feel like they're doing technology for the sake of technology.
Well, there's an interesting thing, just to jump off of your point there, and I hate to always bring it back to extra credits, but it's been on my brain a lot because I read a lot of the scripts and I voice them. There's something that we just released, I think, a week ago, or maybe at this point like 2 or 3. It's called How Games Challenge Us, and one thing, it's normally a reflex challenge or a puzzle type challenge, right?
Yeah.
But we're talking about how other ways games or media really can challenge us, and one is an empathetic challenge.
Yeah.
So one of the examples that this film actually does that we speak about in This Is a Game or a film could basically have like the moment when, as a human being, when we're talking, for instance, you'd be texting with someone and they're taking a little longer than usual, and you see the 3 dots and they disappear, and you see the 3 dots and they disappear, and you already know that something is not like smooth or right with the conversation, and that might prompt you to be like, is everything okay? Are you all right?
Yeah.
Games where we're talking about, like, games have the opportunity to do that at like cheap cost. The film, sort of what you were saying too, it can give you incredible emotional resonance with this shorthand that we all understand.
Yeah.
And imagine if this, I mean, showing this to someone 15 years ago with no context, they'd be like, what the
I think 15 years ago, this would look like Minority Report.
Yeah.
But what's amazing is that it looks like there's nothing unfamiliar about anything they're doing to anyone who lives
day-to-day technology.
Yeah, I would say 99% of our listeners would be very comfortable in this world.
And another thing that I really respected about it, and this is the thing, and I know we've gone back and forth on the concept of gimmick, and how in my opinion, it can be both insulting and a compliment. And in this sort of way, I'm going to use it. Maybe the word itself isn't a compliment, but the fact that it overcomes it is a compliment. Yeah. I think this is a hardcore gimmick film that, you're right, 10 minutes in, I've kind of forgot about the gimmick. Even when it did things that are so hard that I was like, oh yeah, I remember that. I wasn't thinking, I'm in a computer movie. I was thinking they're using a shorthand that I understand very aptly and well. The screensaver for the Mac being something creepy when he's missing calls.
Yeah.
And I was like, shit. Yeah. Like, I was more impressed with the fact that my brain forgot about the gimmick.
Yeah.
And that's something that means to me that something built around that is incredibly successful in that regard. I think that I loved that not only did it sort of understand, current day-to-day technology, but there were moments in it that were very smart and told you as an audience member, if you were paying attention or wanted to, see these sort of things, that this film both respected and understood technology, not just from today, but from forever ago. Yeah. The first one they boot up is a Windows 95 machine or a Windows XP machine. Yeah. And at one point he has to go back and like boot up his old computer to get like files off it and shit. And like the way that it just sort of based on time period of the film, because this movie, as it opens, without getting into too much spoilers in the beginning, it quote ups you very hard.
Yeah.
Thanks Pixar for making that a verb.
Yeah.
So it goes through the
Chronology of this family's life.
yeah, and through that you see how the technology changes.
Yeah,
and
you see how the technology changes and how I think the other thing as well is that technology is not the villain in this film.
No.
Technology is actually
it's a tool.
It's a communication tool that has positive benefits.
Yeah.
In every respect in this film. Like there's never a point in which technology is the bad guy or does something that detrimentally affects what they do.
He would have never been able to find his daughter had the technology not been there.
I guess you could argue,
or as quickly.
I guess you could argue, though, had the technology not existed, the daughter might not have ended up in that situation.
Possibly. No, because I feel like now that I've heaped praise a little bit on this film, I will begin to shine the light to show you where the cracks are. Sadly, other than John Cho and who played Margot, Michelle La, I think the acting and script in this film are kind of atrocious. Yeah, well, writing is average. Acting is atrocious. They got a lot of, I think, actors to do stuff that basically called for voice actors.
Right.
And I don't know if they were always the right choice, because every time anyone who was other than those two and maybe his brother in the film was speaking, like over the phone or whatever, I was like, it was so inhuman.
Yeah.
I was like, is he like in a simulation, or am I missing like a thing, or is there like a big ass twist coming like at the end of this, like that means that like
everyone was a robot?
Everyone's a robot. He's in a game himself, or he's in it's something like the movie The Game, like the Michael Douglas thing, like something like that. Like I didn't, because no one was speaking like an actual human,
right?
And that and again, this is both an insult and a compliment to this film, because the gimmick washed over me and was so effectively used to tell a narrative, and I didn't think of it as a gimmick again until the film was over. But every time an actor other than the lead spoke, I was like, it knocked me back into, oh, this is a bad movie, even though it's not. But it knocked my brain into that space. I think that would have been fixed had they hired actual voice actors instead of standardized actors.
Yeah, I agree. There's a point at which where there's a lot of conversations that are happening where you're not seeing the actors, you're just hearing the actor, and they don't sound, very human. But I just kind of chalk that up to the limitations of, being a low budget movie that was using a technology with a first time director that was kind of interesting. You should listen to that podcast, The Ringer, because they talk about how this film got made.
Sure.
And there's a really interesting process that they went through for this, which is they basically, I think for 7 or 8 weeks, sat down and animatic out the film exactly by building all the screens. And with just the director kind of acting the whole thing out. And then they went, when it came to filming, which they filmed over 13 days with basically a GoPro camera, they filmed all of those scenes just to fill in those holes.
Right.
I agree with you there that occasionally the acting doesn't work. And I would actually even agree that occasionally it feels like John Cho, Deborah Messing, who are actors that I really like, don't know how to kind of perform in this space, like basically with nothing in front of them, because they're not performing against other actors. They're basically in a room by themselves with the director kind of just talking in their ears.
Deborah Messing, I love Deborah Messing, and I thought this was the worst thing I'd ever seen her in. I thought she was terrible. And it sucks.
I will get into exactly why I think there's a problem with Deborah Messing's character and her performance. But I think it's sort of an unusual space for a film to be made in. And to me, I think the film was always a success because I will occasionally think about that, but what I'm thinking about more is how successfully it pulls off most of the things that I think it wants to do. There's sort of an interesting thought process to how this film kind of works in terms of characterization and how we basically have to learn the language of characters through the way they interact with technology. And I think this is one of those cases where we don't need to see a lot of backstory about who John Chu is, what he does, all that sort of stuff to understand how he works, because the technology allows us to see that. Like we see him hesitate on sending a text message. We see him kind of like not understand how Tumblr works. And then we see him then on the opposite side of that just through thought process or just through seeing the actions of the computer, figure out what his thought processes are on how to get his daughter's password. And I think that is really what I like about that in terms of being a success is that it is the film really never tries to amp up the drama in those scenes other than doing what you would have to do on a computer screen. Like it never goes, it never puts them in a speeding car to amp up the drama to try and you know what I mean? Like that sort of thing. All it does is say, okay, how are you going to solve this problem? How is this character going to solve the problem? And in that regards, I thought it always worked. Like him going to Facebook and pulling down all his, his daughter's friends' faces, and then creating a Google Doc, and then writing, like all those interactions. While the conversations were like a little clunky, I was still more like, oh, this is really good thinking. And I, as an audience member, am invested in the outcome of what he's doing.
I agree. I was invested in the outcome of what he was doing. Sadly, I don't think the film sort of pays it off in the end, which we can get to then. Going back to what you said about sort of figuring out the password and all that jazz. The couple articles I read before I watched this was talking about like, oh my God, like this kind of shows like how a parent can get into a kid, their kid's stuff, and I was like, yeah, if the kid never made their own email, and if you made all their emails, then
or if they didn't have a login to the computer.
Yeah, it's like
there's a lot of, but like.
But I didn't care in the moment.
I didn't care in the moment. There is a third act problem with this movie, and so let's kind of divorce the technology from the actual narrative a little bit.
Hey, you know what we should do? We should divorce the narrative and the technology.
Okay. Let's divorce. Let's shake on this. Let's do like a little divorce here. We should divorce the narrative from the technology and think about what the narrative is doing. Now, the narrative is again, it's in the genre that I love. It's true crime thriller or crime thrillers. So these are, like we talked about this before. These are the kinds of movies that I absolutely love.
Yes.
Well within my wheelhouse. So it's got all the tenets of that, which is that the disappearance of a family member and then the pursuit and search and the procedural of trying to find that family member. Along the way, there are many narrative reveals and dead ends which suggest one thing, a la Scooby-Doo, and then reveal something else.
Yes.
In my opinion, where this kind of genre really successfully works is when, for example, the film we reviewed earlier this year, Prisoners, as part of our listener request.
Oh, yes.
When the narrative conceit or the narrative storytelling connects to a thematic idea that this film is trying to pursue. And there is that in this movie. There is this idea about the lengths to which parents will go to protect their children. And that is a thread that is tied through the entire movie. And the only problem is that it goes to a place by the third act, without giving away spoilers, that it does reach for that, and it actually does work, but the performance and the writing in that particular moment doesn't escalate to where we really understand the motivations of that character. And I think we're talking about the Deborah Messing character here, where we basically, without giving away spoilers, we learn something about her. Unfortunately, the performance and the writing doesn't allow us to really, really, really understand, or at least, in my opinion, the way this always works the best is when we kind of empathize with what they're doing.
Right.
And this film kind of doesn't do that. Now, it's, in my mind, again, it's a, look, again, first-time filmmaker, 27 years old.
Sure.
You know what I mean? This movie is more successful than not, in my opinion. And
100%.
that is one of those things that to me is not successful. But on the whole, I am still on board with this movie for the innovations that it makes and for the successes that it actually has.
Yeah, I always find it interesting though, and I agree with the heaps of praise at the end of that statement you just made. However, I always find it interesting that when a film like this, its large conceit is, say, something that's technological or a gimmick that works incredibly well, that people studied and made work and like figured out the minutia and worked super hard on making it come out cool, and not only cool but like relatable, understandable, and something that'll instantly wash over you.
Yeah.
But then they ignore the things that actually will really hold it together over the test of time. Like this movie, I think, would have been something that I would have returned to many times had the story itself been stronger, had the acting been stronger, had the third act been stronger, and not necessarily there was a lot of there was one or two like solid, like true red herrings that once the red herring was twisted, you look back and you're like, this was set up so hard for you in the beginning. Like there was two in particular we'll talk about where I was like, okay, that's going to be a thing that's not true. That's going to be a thing that's not true. And then when the thing that is quote true happens, it comes out of left field and is given to us in a very like, and now I will tell you my master plan.
It's
and I was like,
the Alfred Hitchcock Psycho ending where like someone comes out and explains everything that happened.
Yeah, and I don't like that.
Now I don't disagree with you. I guess I'm more on the side of saying, again, I actually think all that stuff works. It's an execution problem at that point. Like I actually think the narrative conceit that the film has by the end and the twist actually kind of all functions within the framework of the story, but it's not executed well.
No.
And that, but again, I think. For example, here's another film like this where I think it's maybe suffers from the same problem. It's been a long time since I saw this, but the original Saw movie.
Sure.
The original Saw movie has got such a sort of jarring final act that it doesn't quite land, like the reveal of how it's all working, but I'm so on board with the movie at this point that it doesn't really matter, and it's more a case of execution. And by the time James Wan, who directed the original Saw with Lee Wannell, by the time they get to The Conjuring, they that is a problem that they are long past, and they're
100%.
They're much, much beyond.
But
so I guess the only thing I take umbrage with is when you describe it as atrocious. I don't think it's atrocious.
I said one actor's performance was atrocious.
I think you said the writing was atrocious.
Oh, the writing is by the third act, and any character that is not Margot or John Cho, then yes, it is.
I think that's too harsh a criticism for again how successful this film is.
No. But also, I'm not going to leverage what I think a director's future successes will be on their current film.
I'm not suggesting that either. What I'm suggesting is that it's not atrocious. It's just there is a level of execution that doesn't play in. Atrocious, I feel like
I did actually take atrocious back now that I said the writing was average.
Right.
That's what I said atrocious for both of them. So just to clarify, I said the writing was average. But again, when you have pinnacles, when you have peaks of this film being the gimmick of using the computers and everything that works so well, it actually shines more of a light onto the things that are just average, and in a weird way makes them feel worse to me than they would if the entire film was average. Now, this is something that I think is slightly important from my experience. I want this film. You're 100% correct. Structurally, story-wise, it holds up enough. It's the analogy I would use is like, yes, a building that is big, square, and concrete will hold people. There's no question. But I don't think if you don't put stuff inside of it, or you don't make it nicer, some sort of aesthetically pleasing design, it's not as good as it could be. Do you know what I mean? So while this does hold the story, they could have added a couple pages here or there of sort of character development or interaction that would make what happens at the end I don't want to say make sense, because everything
makes sense,
but it does not resonate. The core conceit of the beginning of this film that John Cho doesn't know his daughter and there is an estrangement between him and his daughter is actually never really addressed. It's cleared up, but the thing that the first two-thirds of this film tell you is important, it kind of throws out the window and just goes straight with the standard procedural find the daughter narrative, and then at the end, because now we're getting into spoilers, I guess, that she's found, everything's okay. And there's a small moment at the very end of the film and again using the technology with the text and the waiting and what text he meant to send before and deleted, and he sends it. Yes, it is subtle and it is a nice sort of nod, but you told me a thing was hyper important for 2/3 of your movie, and then to just have one little thing at the end that really speaks to what I was told was important felt jarring and kind of, it felt like a mistake.
I wouldn't describe it as a mistake. I think I think it doesn't
less
quite
effective than it could be.
Yeah, I don't think it lands as effectively as good. I actually, but no, that's not true. I liked that ending. I like the fact that he sends
nice
that
ending.
particular text message that he didn't send at the beginning. I think that's the character journey for that character, and it works. I think the thing that doesn't quite necessarily land is the exposition around what actually happened to the daughter.
I think it's why the daughter is gone and what happened to the daughter. I think both are not treated with enough time and care.
We should jump into spoilers.
Let's
here.
do it.
So now we've divorced the narrative from the technology.
Sure.
Now we're gonna marry the narrative and the technology with spoilers.
Okay.
In a sort of polygamous relationship.
Okay, I'm
in
following.
This harem of only movie podcasts.
Analogy.
Yep. Okay.
Okay.
And let's so the big reveal here is that the big bad, a la Scooby-Doo, is Deborah Messing.
Woodward Raggy.
Yeah, who didn't just get assigned to this case,
No.
but volunteered for it. And also that Margaret, his daughter, is actually alive, even after being claimed deceased at some point during the movie.
Yes, someone admitted to her murder.
Yeah, exactly. Now, I think all of that stuff works. Like there's nothing in the film that isn't set up. So, for example, when Deborah Messing, reveals that it was her son that had a relationship with the daughter, or that basically catfished the daughter and ended up killing her, we've learnt previously that Deborah Messing's character, her name is Vic,
Yep.
by the way, had tells the story of how she found out that her son had gone around the neighborhood and asked for $25 from everyone, and she covered it. Like she basically went along with the lie, which sets up the idea that there's an extrapolation towards the end of the movie.
It's a nice character moment.
It's a nice character moment. It is basically the idea that we don't know our kids, and we are willing to do anything to protect even the worst parts about them. And I think the ending, which reveals that is what she does, makes sense. Unfortunately, what happens is, and this is the performance and writing part for just this moment, and one subsequent moment, so these are the criticisms I have of the film, is that essentially what needs to happen here, in my opinion, is Deborah Messing needs to be the inverse version of John Cho. She is the version of John Cho that, if left unchecked, his inability to deal with his daughter's actions or his inability to connect with his daughter, if left unchecked, she is inverted mirror
Sure.
reflection of what he will become. And she's not.
No.
She basically, at the end of the movie, just sort of calmly and procedurally explains exactly what happens in this sort of in this interview, which kind of stretches the credulity of how he would see that as well. Living on a screen. But again, they do so much work to make sure that everything lands on a screen that I thought was kind of great. And we don't really get to enjoy or empathize with her perspective on this in a way that is meaningful. And unfortunately, that lets that final act down, because I think if that final act had really, as you said, dwelled in this moment and really thought about the implications of this moment, then I think it would have really landed. The other thing is, the reveal that Margaret is still alive, again, works because the narrative conceit is set up that while she was missing for 5 days, within 2 days there was a torrential downpour, which means she would have had access to water or something like that. I get it. It unfortunately is not narratively satisfying. It makes you it feels cheap. But the two things. One is this video essay by Patrick Williams that talks about plot holes not mattering. Plot holes is basically a shortcut for us saying that we just don't like a movie. I don't kind of 100% agree, but there are two cases this year that I think actually work in that respect, and one is A Quiet Place, which I really enjoyed despite kind of not plot holes, but plot contrivances that don't necessarily land, but I still think I was 100% on board for that movie, so it actually works. And then for this one, there are plot contrivances that kind of that you could argue take you out of the story, but I don't think they do. I think there's an execution problem which happens towards the back end of this film, and it's unfortunate, but it's also, again, like I said, the movie is more successful than it's not. One final thought before I hand it over. I love because this is set in San Jose, California. I
Yes.
used to live in Irvine. I went to college in UC Irvine, and I lived in California for a while. The amazing thing about this that I don't think what I love is that they don't actually make mention of this fact, but it's just the way it is. Is this the people in this film look like the people that lived in California when I was there? They are Asian, they are Indian, there are all ranges of ethnicities, and it's never once uttered. And it really, to me, it made me think about how every movie set in California tends to not feature that many Asian people.
Yeah.
When my experience of it was all Asian people.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, it was like in every community I went to, in my college, it was all Asian people. And I was like, I love that this film is just taking that and just doing it. And it's in essence, it's being the change that we want without having to address it.
Yeah, well, that is the change. It's that's it. Yeah, no, that's great.
I love that.
I think as far as again, I the first 2/3, I have to go back to the fact, like, had me emotionally invested.
Yeah.
But I was emotionally invested in something, honestly, that didn't pay off for me. The mystery was not.
Yeah.
The where is Margot didn't really matter to me.
Mm-hmm.
It was more, why is Margot?
Mm-hmm.
And it actually brought up a point that I hope we get to see in the near future in movies and games or whatever, where, like, I feel like this movie felt as though, like, it went through a thing where it was, the script maybe was nearly done, but then someone was like, well, it doesn't feel like the stakes are high enough, or it doesn't feel like, something. And so they had to add in a bit more of, like, murder or something. Like, I don't know where or what, but what I would be interested in seeing, to be honest, would be more exploration of the relationship between John Cho and Margot, and why Margot left. I'd like to see somewhat of a clues and possibly a confrontation between them at some point, because in the film we don't actually see too many interactions that would warrant anything like that. It was more of like you sort of glean or imagine a slow burn of why she would do what she did.
Yeah.
Also, I think finding your daughter who ran away and dealing with that is a far more interesting story and conceit than finding the person who possibly murdered her. Like,
Right.
because we've seen that story a trillion fucking times.
Yeah.
And I would like to see more of what was kind of promised in the first 2/3 of the film, and be like, I wish he used his relationship with his daughter to find her along with this technology. I wish, rather than hacking into something he was vastly unfamiliar with, I wish he used, like, because if he had found her using clues, sort of knowing her,
Yeah.
it would make the emotional conceit of the ending where, like, they're fine and he actually knows her better.
Yeah.
And I want to see the use of this sort of gimmick or things in this ilk to tell, I guess, for lack of a better term, and this might not be correct, but smaller stories. Right. I don't need it to be a murder. I don't need it to be a highly confrontational thing. I'd rather see a piece about a father and a daughter that are estranged, sort of the finding of that and figuring out why it happened and how they can rectify it. This, I feel like, by the third act is like, well, we got to crank this up. But it almost didn't trust in its. It felt like this. Again, this is me. I'm putting myself on it. It felt, while I was watching it, when that hit that sort of third act and things started really hitting the fan, it didn't trust its own emotional side of its narrative to carry us through. And it had to use the cheaper shorthand that most thrillers do, as opposed to leaning into its strengths of the shorthand it already used until, like, the very end of the film. So that was the moment where it kind of broke for me. And I also, I want to sort of flip back to say, I think this is a film, I hope everyone that's listening has seen it, and also people that are listening to this haven't read too much about the film, because I think that might have affected how I went into it or what I was expecting. I was sort of promised by various reviewers that this is one of the best films of the year. and I don't particularly agree. I think it's highly effective. I guess are we getting into? Yeah, I mean, kind of, sort of. I'll start my final thoughts because unless we have more things.
I have things I want to talk about.
Okay, then go for it. Go for it.
Well,
I'm sorry.
The thing that you kind of mentioned there about the father-daughter relationship. One of the things we've seen, well, I've seen this year, is that becoming a dad has made me narratively invested in films that have to do with the parent-child relationship, and in ways that weren't true. Well, that were true for me before I was a parent, but more so true for me now. So, for example, the opening scene of A Quiet Place it just sent me over the edge, kind of thing. In this case, this is a film about the relationship, the strained relationship between a father and daughter after the loss of the mother. And I agree with you. I would think that would have me invested in the emotional outcome of this story, and it wasn't. I wasn't emotionally invested by the end of this movie with what was happening with the daughter. I think the reveals, sort of the way this narrative needs to work. And again, this is just the loosely borrowing from what my understanding of the genre that I like, is that it works best when the procedural is more of an exploration of who the daughter is and how the relationship work. And again, a film like Prisoners explores that to its fullest extent, because Prisoners is about the limits of which the limits of morality that a character has, and the procedural there test the limits of morality of that character. And so in this film, if we were to apply that kind of structure to it, the film is about the detachment, estrangement between this father and daughter since the death of their mother, and the separation, the kind of inciting incident, the procedural, should test that detachment, and it does to an extent. I think everything's there. Like the idea that he doesn't understand his daughter, he doesn't know that she's a loner, he doesn't understand that her, like he's forcing her to go to these piano lessons, but these piano lessons are reminding her of his mother that he's not talking about. That all kind of, it makes sense, but it doesn't emotionally resonate in the way that I think it's supposed to. And it has to do with this third act, which kind of becomes more procedural. Now, the third act is kind of connected to that story as well, because Vic's character has the same dilemma with her child and is basically going through the same thing.
I think the reason why it doesn't connect just with John Cho's character is because we're told through the thing that he doesn't know his daughter, but we never actually experience him not knowing his daughter. Every time we see an interaction with them, it seems totally fine.
There is one scene where we're on UChat, I think it's called, or UCast, which is the fictional site. Of all the things they make that fictional site. And there's a scene where she basically, it's the mother's birthday, and he walks in, and instead of, he's like, I forgot to tell you, and he wants to express this thing about his dead wife, but he can't, and instead he just talks about let's watch TV to their own voice. And I think that's his coping mechanism, is not to talk about it, and that's probably the thing that drives her away.
Sure,
but it's not. It doesn't land as effectively as I think we would hope it would, and we don't see David's character kind of dwelling in the realization that was the moment.
It's also a father, you could tell, trying to reach out to his kid and messing it up, of course, but it's still a very kind gesture, and they're gonna spend time together. He wasn't shut down or distant or anything. It seemed like he was very involved in her life, and then she just started keeping things from. So I don't know. It seemed to, nothing he did ever in that film led me to believe that she would have been so unhappy to have even contemplated the running away.
What I liked about the film as well, though, is the relationship felt true to father-daughter or familial relationships that I've seen in my life.
Okay.
Particularly in the South Asian community, there's a stringent pressure upon which parents put upon their kids to succeed. The tiger mom phenomenon kind of thing. and this felt true to that, and I guess what I've seen in that respect, again, I don't mean this to be like a sort of apology for the way it's handled in this film or the way it doesn't quite resonate in this film, but what I've seen in those relationships is that there is a resentment from the child to the parent because of it's not because the parent is neglectful or the parent isn't loving. There's this resentment of the pressure that child has thrust upon them. And I've seen that play out in ways where there is a, horrible, it's almost as though the parent was
Sure.
abusing the child.
But that's not in this movie.
Yeah, it doesn't, well, it's there, but it's not, it doesn't land.
No, I mean, I would say we're taking, cultural things we've experienced in that case and putting it onto what this possibly could be. The film does not show that.
The example for me is the piano lesson.
But he's never like, you need to take these. That's more of what you're describing as opposed to just being like, I truly believe in this narrative that the world set up. That if Margot said to John Cho, I have to remember David Kim.
Yeah.
If Margot said to David, I don't want to take these piano lessons anymore, he would be like, well, why? You love piano. And he wouldn't be like, you have to take these lessons. He would have been like, okay, I understand. Like,
Right.
That's the character I was shown. So to portray it as that otherwise, that doesn't click with me in that regard. I'm not saying those relationships don't exist. They 100% exist in the real life. But that's just not in this movie.
Yeah, I agree with you that the way, I guess my thing here is that I think it's all there. It's just not clicking. And the way it clicks is by expanding some ideas and reducing some. It's in the cooking analogy, it's the reduction of the sauce is not quite balanced at this point. And I think.
And I'm sorry. I think that it's not working. I'm sorry. I think it's not clicking because it's not all there.
You think there are ingredients missing?
I think it's the same problem, but sort of I think we're the yin and the yang of what the actual.
Whereas I think everything's there, just not quite to the quantities that they need to be, or to the lesson of quantities.
And I think the quantities aren't there because the stuff isn't.
What are we making here? Are we making
gumbo? Paella.
Oh, I thought we were making gumbo.
Which is kind of similar.
No, but they make gumbo in the film.
Oh.
Remember the brothers making like a kimchi gumbo?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Let's make that.
Let's make it. Kimchi gumbo doesn't sound.
No.
I'm not a big fan of kimchi, by the way.
Kimchi's fine.
To all the Korean listeners here, I apologize, but I'm not the biggest fan
I like
of kimchi.
I'm not
I
gonna
love
lie.
Korean food, but kimchi is not one of those things that I guess I don't even like. And this is a strange reveal. Is that. Is my family owns a pickle farm, and I don't like pickled foods. So,
Well, that might explain why.
Like,
Maybe
I don't
we
like-
should do a film revolving around you Skyping with your family on the pickle farm.
Yeah.
About how you don't like pickles and where that actually came from. But then in the third act, murder.
yeah, murder. No, it's generally just being a fussy eater as a kid, and never getting over it. No, like to me, the successes of this film outweighs the negatives, and there are negatives. There are criticisms to be had about this film. Certainly within the third act, I don't think it lands. I don't think it works. Despite having, in my opinion, all the elements there to work, it just feels like a little bit of an imbalance. Chalk it up to first time filmmaker, low budget, perhaps, maybe one of those two things. Maybe I don't want to point it at the script because I think all the elements are there, and it's just a matter of execution and balance, as all things should be.
Thanks, Thanos.
There you go. First MCU reference from me.
Ha!
There you go.
Zing! Last week, James brought up the MCU before I
I
did.
heard that. Yeah. The other side of this, the reason why I am on board with the reviews hyping this film up is that the innovation that this film displays are worth the price of admission.
Yes.
Are 100% worth the price of admission. And I think, and I believe as well that in the right context, the emotional weight of the things that are happening would work. For me, they personally didn't. And I can tell, and I think I've explained why I think they didn't. But I think if you're on board to seeing a father-daughter Gone Girl kind of relationship play out. It's not as good as Gone Girl, but I think it actually does work. And again, also seeing Asian faces, like I cannot quantify how important that is. We haven't reviewed Crazy Rich Asians this time around, but we had this come up in our Ocean's 8 review as well, which was that I didn't think that was a great movie, but I did acknowledge the fact of going to see a movie with all women is a powerful reason to go to the movie.
Sure.
And I can't sort of quantify how powerful it is for me personally seeing a young Indian filmmaker making a film with a predominantly Asian cast.
Yeah.
I think that, like I'm writing a screenplay right now where I'm going, we had this conversation on our Can Batman Be Black episode where I was saying I default every character to white as a sort of mechanism to say that this is a movie, therefore all the characters are white.
Right.
Seeing this movie made me reconsider that on the screenplay I'm writing right now, where I'm like, you know what? Why can't all these characters be Asian? And if they are, then I should deal with that and write about that and make that part of the film. And I don't. And seeing how that this film could be successful, seeing John Cho as a leading man, acknowledging that John Cho should be as important a leading man as James Franco is,
right?
Makes me go, oh yeah, it's me that's the problem here. It's me that's not seeing the potential, and a film like this is showing me that.
Sure.
And so that is powerful to me, and that's why I'm okay with the reviews hyping this as well.
Well, so you're kind of okay with the metatextualness of the review. Or no, sorry, you're okay with the effect of the reviews, even though, which is fine, it's totally okay, as opposed to I'll back up. I think all the press that I've seen for this overall being sort of glowing is overall a good thing for all of the reasons that you've listed. I want more eyeballs to see this film. I think the things that it really wants to focus on, it does very well. I think the representation is 100% on point. I think that, again, smaller films to larger audiences only can help. But I do wish that I was... the problems with the film that I had and you had too, I was never brought up anywhere that I read. And would I rather have this movie be have glowing praise so that more people see it than be like, well, actually, it doesn't really tie in the emotional aspect. Yes, of course, but it did set me up to have a bit more of a high expectation than I would have, and that is on me as well as sort of reading things. I guess my final thought is you should see this film because it is literally for lack of a better term, slice of technological life in 2018 that you have never seen portrayed as accurately or as correct in a film before. I would stand by that statement. I think it makes you almost to the point more aware of the emotional tie you have with the type of technology that you use. And by that, I mean, there's maybe also the emotional responses you can have from the technology that you are experiencing. I think the main actors do a good job. I think the script itself, while structurally sound, the dialogue is fairly pedantic. I think that given some more context into the more relationship aspects of the film in the first 2/3 of the movie, if that was sort of tied back more thematically a la Prisoners, I think it would have been easily one of my favorite films in the year. It just didn't quite stick that. So while I do think it is good, and I do think that everyone should see it for all of the plethora of reasons we've said, I can't be like, it doesn't fall in my top for this year thus far.
No. And I certainly agree with that. I think I was just thinking a little bit about my reaction to Ocean's 8 versus this, and that question of representation versus narrative. And in my opinion, the thing here is that the narrative is pretty good in this one. Like, I was invested in what was happening, whereas in Ocean's 8, I wasn't. And so the question, I think the response that I had to Ocean's 8 was, I like that this is a film about representation, but I just wish it was a better film, and I can't recommend it for that reason. Whereas in this case, I like that this is about representation, but I think this is a pretty good film, and I can recommend it for that reason. There's a sort of I don't want to. I've been thinking a lot about my Ocean's 8 response because I still don't respond well to that movie. But I think I can. I think the rationalization that I have for recommending this over that still stands, because it makes sense to me that this is a better movie than that.
I don't know. I don't know if, and I don't want to get, because we're at the end of the podcast, I don't know if I think this is a better movie than that.
Really?
Because and I'm not saying but like, I would have to take a lot of time and weigh the pros and cons of all of them. They both have blaring like heights and pretty bad flaws. And I
don't think Ocean's 8 has the heights of this.
Ocean's 8 has the heights of this in the sense of it is a movie that up until recently, for instance, had never had sort of the budget or the ad dollars or whatever you want for this level of like fun, big budget heist film for all women of multiple ethnicities. That hadn't been like, so like that's an important thing anyway. Even though it is silly and popcorn and kind of nonsense, it sets up a world that is silly, popcorn and kind of nonsense and sticks to it. So that's fine. And that works for me because I know what I'm going in for when I go in for it. This film, while a lot of it does work for me on a narrative level, it takes 2/3 of the film that tells me that something is important, the relationship, and then it sort of puts that on. It doesn't get rid of it, but it puts it on the back burner for a very procedural thing at the end, and it kind of switches. It switches what it tells me is important. Ocean's 8 tells me that the interaction between these women and the fun you're going to have watching the film is important. Whereas this film tells me for the first 2/3, the father-daughter relationship is important. Then for the last third, it's like the whodunit is the only thing that matters. And then there's one sort of throwback to it. So, and again, I'm saying literally just off the top of my head, I liked Ocean's 8 better.
Right.
But I could go in a deep dive and maybe find more flaws to sort of like weigh it out. And this isn't by like leaps and bounds, but like
I would completely obviously from personal opinion 100% disagree.
Yeah.
I think Ocean's 8 is a much worse movie, and this is a fairly good movie. It's fairly good because of the heights and the emotional interest I had in what was happening, whereas I didn't have much interest in what was happening in Ocean's 8, regardless of the metatextual surroundings of it. So in I guess in my balance of equations, the metatextual is secondary to narrative, and if you place it in those terms, Ocean's 8 is a far lesser film because the narrative is far less interesting. And even in that sort of tongue-in-cheek kind of let's just have some fun kind of way, I was just not interested in that movie. Whereas this, I was interested in what was happening and I was engaged in what was happening.
The narrative in this would have been better if it had actually stuck what the landing was that it told me was important, I think. For me.
You made that point. Yeah. So the only I think the closing of this is what I would say is I was listening to an interview with Ethan Hawke, and he was talking about a conversation that he had with Paul Schrader. Paul Schrader is the director of the film First Reformed. He also wrote Taxi Driver. And Paul Schrader was saying they were talking about what makes great cinema. And Paul Schrader said something along the lines of the best movies are the ones that begin as you walk out of the theater. And the problem with this movie is that the movie ends. It ends completely resoutly at the end of this film. So there's not a lot to walk away from thinking about. And I think it's an axiom that Ethan Hawke and Paul Schrader were talking about in relation to their movie.
Right.
But I think it applies to the way I think about this movie, which is that I think it's a very, very good movie. I think it actually the narrative stakes are there. The writing is all the narrative construction is all there for the thriller. Then it's layered upon that with the technological aspect that is treated with respect and dignity and true to what we understand about technology. And that makes it exciting. Does the film resonate beyond that? Does the emotional weight of this father-daughter relationship for me actually land? Not really. But again, the film is more successful than it is not, and it is a high recommendation for me on that level. I think we try to talk about films with appropriate criticism, so we're not just lavishing praise or unabashedly. We're trying to negotiate what the film is doing, and I think that is a fair negotiation of this movie, which is that it fundamentally works, but not always.
Would you say we're always searching for the both the good and the bad of films?
Occasionally, one of us is using Google and the other one is using Bing.
That Zoe is using Ask Jeeves.
Yeah.
Anyway, this has been the only podcast about the film Searching. Shahir, when you are not trying to hack into your son's new that you haven't even invented yet email, where can folks find you?
This is a funny story. We actually have created an email account for my son.
Fuck you.
That we send him emails to. That was actually a bit that really resonated with me in this film. is that we have an email account for my son that we send him emails to with the idea that it'll be a time capsule, like in whenever.
Okay, that's adorable. He doesn't check his email.
No,
like
he
you
doesn't
don't
check
give.
his email.
Yeah.
He's a 2-year-old.
I know, but I didn't know what you're doing. I didn't know if you were training him to be some savant.
No, we're sending him emails
That's
about
lovely.
things we're thinking. I thought it would be an interesting thing with this film.
That's lovely. No, that's very nice.
But anyway, I'm not going to give you what that email is.
No.
But you can email, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, me. Ucast me. You could Ucast me.
Sure.
At shahirdaud.com. That's SHAHIRDAUD.com. Matt, when you are searching for narrative reasons for a film to actually connect with you, where could you do that or post about those responses?
You can find me writing my dissertation on Gymkhana at MATTHEWKROL.com for my life and works, or Skeletor, the number 4, PREZ on Instagram, or Emperor MSK on Twitter. Also, please send us in what you think of Searching. onlymoviepodcast@gmail.com and onlymoviepod on Twitter. We will be back next week with a film we haven't decided yet.
No.
Here's something I'd like to ask everybody. If you've stuck through this podcast and you're at the very end, write us in here. Would it be helpful for you as an audience member to know the film we are doing the following week? Because I'm willing to do that legwork early if it's something that like you want to make sure as an audience that you've seen before we discuss it. Now, can I guarantee we'll hit that every time? No, but I would like to try that if it's something, if we get enough emails or tweets or whatever in with that in mind, I'm happy to try to do that more. And we'll see how it goes. Well, that's just sort of my last little ditch.
Yeah. We're trying to make this legit, yo. So you guys need to get involved.
Yeah, that's. I got nothing. We'll see you next week, yo.
Ask Siri where we will be or what movie we'll be doing.
Yeah, yo.
Siri, you should end this with Siri going, "I have no fucking clue, here."
I think I'll just leave it with that.